Jimrex? What's Jimrex? Would you believe a movie audience guide presented as a public service by this theater's management to help you select your motion picture entertainment?
Throughout the 20th century, films have had an important role in society and culture. However, the advent of censorship has had a major part in the creation of the film rating system and the MPAA. The debate over what should be included in films led to the diplomatic solution of prevalent film censorship, film rating systems, and families could have a safe movie viewing experience. Before the creation of the MPAA, a couple states in the U.S. had a film board, with the majority of cities having one too. These boards would monitor the films that were released during that time. This era of Hollywood is most commonly referred to as pre-code Hollywood because of the absence of a mandatory code that the cities and states must follow. Chicago was the first state to get a film board, followed by Pennsylvania a couple of years later. These film boards were largely inconsistent around the United States, with some boards banning certain things that were not even considered by other states. In 1922, however, William H. Hayes is selected to become the president of the newly founded Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America. Only a few years into his presidency in 1927, Will Hayes created the Don'ts and Be Carefuls, a list of rules that filmmakers must follow when making a film. This list ultimately did not sit well with filmmakers because of the overly strict rules they would have to follow. For instance, surgical operations, kissing, and scenes involving law enforcement were all banned. Due in part to the failure of the Don'ts and Be Carefuls, a new code was created entitled the Motion Picture Production Code, which is more widely known as the Hayes Code. The Hayes Code was a far more detailed and enhanced version of the Don'ts and Be Carefuls, with some rules being added and some being removed. Despite this being created as an updated version of the Don'ts and Be Carefuls, it still had many flaws that impacted its enhanced version image. Certain words and kissing were still banned, along with toilet gags and the use of liquor when it was not required by the plot. To make matters worse, the MPPDA still had issues enforcing the code on filmmakers, with the Hayes Code still being largely ignored. But in order to combat these reoccurring issues, the Production Code Administration was created as a way to successfully enforce the Hayes Code. Filmmakers now had to submit their films to the PCA and if approved, would get a PCA seal of approval. But if the PCA were to reject the film entirely, then it would not get a PCA seal and it wouldn't get a theatrical release. Even with the creation of the Hayes Code and the Production Code Administration, Hollywood was still a highly debated subject all over the country. In 1933, the Catholic Church formed the Legion of Decency, which is created as a way to boycott and even blacklist certain films that were too controversial and offensive. At the height of its popularity, the Legion of Decency had up to 12 million members. The failure of the Hayes Code and the Legion of Decency made Hollywood's reputation worsen over the next few years, especially with the Supreme Court. Over the years, the Supreme Court had considered multiple times that films should be protected under the First Amendment, but they still were not sure. The state-regulated film boards were not removed by the Supreme Court, but they also believed that censorship was important for films. In 1945, Will Hayes retired from the MPPDA. Afterwards, Eric Johnson was chosen as the new president of the MPPDA, which he renamed to the now iconic Motion Picture Association of America. On May 26, 1952, during the Joseph Burstyn v. Wilson case, the Supreme Court finally labeled films under First Amendment protection. This was called the Miracle Decision, named after the film of the same name that inspired this case. The Supreme Court briefly stated that motion pictures are a significant medium for the communication of ideas, and are therefore entitled to First Amendment protection. Following this decision, the production code was slightly modified to relieve restrictions relating to sex, drug use, and language, such as the phrase, "hold on to your hat," while adding some restrictions on religion. In 1966, Jack Valenti became president of the MPAA. Born on September 5, 1921, Jack Valenti first started in Hollywood as a theater usher when he was 14 years old. A couple of years later, Valenti met Lyndon B. Johnson, who was vice president to President John F. Kennedy. Following Kennedy's assassination on November 22, 1963, Jack Valenti became the now President Lyndon B. Johnson's press rep for the entirety of his term. Valenti eventually departed from politics in 1966 when he became president of the MPAA, and only a few months into his presidency, Valenti changed several things. In 1968, Jack Valenti introduced the film rating system, which was a system of ratings that a film could get upon release. Administrated by the Classification and Ratings Administration and adhered by the National Association of Theater Owners, The film rating system was a completely redesigned version of the PCA and the Hays Code. For one, the film rating system introduced a set of ratings that would be assigned to a film upon release. The first iteration of the system featured G, suggested for general audiences, M, suggested for mature audiences, R, suggested that persons under 16 not be admitted unless accompanied by a parent or adult guardian, and finally X, where anyone under the age of 16 would not be admitted into the theater. When the film rating system was first introduced, Valeni stated that the first objective of classification is to free the filmmaker, to loose the artistic fetters around his creative ankles by segregating the pictures. We felt we had to show a concern for children and for parents and describe accurately the content of films so parents will know what they're taking their kids to go see. The system was voluntary, meaning filmmakers did not have to submit their films to the MPAA. However, it proved to be mandatory if a filmmaker were to want their film to be given exposure. Jack Valeni also instated a new system of rating boards. These boards were a part of the Classification and Rating Administration, and each board member was required to be a parent, and they were not allowed to have any sort of connection to Hollywood at all. And members were required to resign once their child became 21 years old. With the many new updates and enhancements Jack Valeni brought to the MPAA, it wouldn't be far-fetched to say that filmmakers saw this as an incredible new system that was far better than the previous systems from the past. While many filmmakers were happy with the newly introduced system, there were still many that outright despised it. Many debated that it wasn't that much of an upgrade from the former Hays Code and that it was still overly protective of certain things. To add on to this, many debated if censorship was even necessary, because some filmmakers saw the Hays Code as a limitation of their freedom of speech. The ratings themselves also didn't seem to make much of a difference to whether or not a film was successful or not. Both films, Midnight Cowboy and A Clockwork Orange, received an X rating upon release. However, this did not affect the film's box office success in the slightest. Both films were box office hits and won many awards, with Midnight Cowboy even winning an Academy Award for Best Picture. The X rating itself proved to cause some issues with the MPAA, because many pornographic films adopted the rating as a way to make more money. Even with the criticisms Jack Valeni and the MPAA faced, the rating system was still popular with parents for its helpful ratings guide that made it easier for them to attend the movies with their children. Along with films in general, the film rating system has also evolved over time. By 1981, all state-regulated film boards shut down for good, with the last one to shut down being the Maryland Censorship Board. The ratings themselves also changed a couple of times over the years. The M rating was changed to the GP and later PG, with parental guidance being suggested. The rise of special effects in the 1980s changed the way filmmakers make films and how they're presented. However, the film Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom reached concerns with parents after a scene featuring a beating heart being ripped out from the chest of a human sacrifice. The director of the film, Steven Spielberg, advised Jack Valeni about the rating issue, with him saying that there should be a rating between PG and R. Valeni thought this was a great idea, so the PG-13 rating was born. And the first film to receive a PG-13 rating was called Red Dawn, and it was released in 1984. The X rating was also changed to NC-17 in order for the MPAA to further distance itself from the pornographic film industry. Hollywood studios too evolved since the rating system was introduced, with there being a huge spike in profit from theaters and home video sales. Parents all over the country now have the ability to know what films are right for their children, with family attendance in theaters rising since the introduction of the system. Political figures have also taken a liking to the film rating system and have accepted that films are a form of human art and not a waste of time and resources. In 2004, Jack Valeni stepped down as president of the MPAA, and 3 years later, he passed away on April 26, 2007. He was 86 years old. Due to censorship, the First Amendment, and the film rating system, films have significantly evolved over time. Censorship debates and the issues with the Supreme Court led to the mistreatment of films in the early 20th century. Will Hays tried to create a rating system which unfortunately flopped in the eyes of political figures and filmmakers. Until when in 1952, the miracle decision was made protecting films under the First Amendment and thereby labeling them as free speech. Soon after that, Jack Valeni took over as president of the MPAA and created a successful film rating system which ensured a safe movie-going experience for all ages. This even carries on today, with the filmratings.com website and frequent reminders of a film rating across theaters all over the country. From being considered a waste of human resources to becoming one of the most celebrated art forms in history, cinema as a whole has faced several different challenges, but to quote Jack Valeni, "The only group in America that deserves to scrutinize what we are doing are parents."
want you to rest well, and a month from now, this Hollywood big shot's gonna give you what you want.
Too late. They start shooting in a week.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.